welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Pho, founder and editor of KevinMD. Rate and review the show at kevinmd.com/rate. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/follow. Today's show, we have Curtis Graham. He is an obstetrician gynecologist, and he's here to talk about his KevinMD article titled Financial Survival for Physicians in Private Medical Practice. Curtis, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin, for giving me the opportunity to discuss a few things that I consider very important to the medical profession in general, and specifically to private medical practitioners.
All right, so we'll get into that article in a little bit. First off, briefly share your story and journey to where you are today.
Well, I practiced about 40 years in clinical medical practice, and I found out that there was something I was missing through all those years and made a vow to find out what the problem was. And as it turns out, I was business ignorant and didn't understand what that meant to a physician in private practice. And so I didn't catch on to that. My practice was fantastic. And then all of a sudden I'm finding out that it disappeared from under me. And so I was forced to launch back into employment part of practice of medicine, as thousands of doctors in this country is happening to now. And everybody's wondering why. They have the same questions I did. And I vowed to myself when I retired that I would go back and I would find out the real reason behind all of this, which all physicians ought to be aware of. And that's why I'm here today.
So when you said that your practice disappeared from under you, what exactly did you mean by that?
It means financially, basically. I was so business ignorant that I didn't understand that one of the requirements of business across the world today, among all businesses, and we know medical practice is a business, apply to medical practice business as well. So I found out that you have to have a good knowledge of management of business and a good knowledge of marketing for business, the two qualities that make every business successful one way or another. And so I finally recognized that after I retired and began researching the whole process. And what surprised me was that the medical schools have, for some reason across our nation, all of them have never had any idea about teaching doctors about business and marketing, and that none of them had offered courses in business and marketing in the medical schools. And when I found that out, then I found out my problem was that I was business ignorant.
So we're going to get into your article in a little bit, but before I do, I just want to ask you, just give my audience a sense of what your practice was like when you were in private practice. How many people were there? And did you have administrative staff that presumably would manage the business side of your private practice?
Well, I never made enough money in my practice to really hire a manager for the practice. And with the stories that I found out about supposed managers of practice aren't so hot either. But I couldn't afford to do that. I could afford to continually maintain my practice on the cutting edge of medical practice. I was the first to have an ultrasound in my practice in OBGYN and my area that I practiced. I was the first to do laparoscopic surgery in Northern California at the time and such thing. I loved that. I wanted to be the best I could be and never found out until later on why I was being held up for financial reasons primarily.
So you were by yourself? I assume you had some medical assistants, but primarily by yourself. Is that correct?
Solo medical practice by myself.
All right. So let's talk more about your KevinMD article, and you could share some of the lessons that you've learned. It's titled Financial Survival for Physicians in Private Medical Practice. Now, for those who didn't get a chance to read your article, just walk my audience through it.
Well, I thought it was critical when I found out that medical schools had never over the last century offered business and marketing education. My research that I did after I retired from practice in 1999 showed me those things. And I just want to make everyone aware of what they're missing. And there may be thousands of doctors out there now. I would estimate that probably 95% of medical doctors that graduate from medical school today are truly, basically business ignorant. Some learn by their experiences of working in a business or something like that, but the real quality stuff that you get out of that education needs to be a formal education in business and marketing. And that's what schools need to add to their medical school curriculums, which I have not done. I'm trying to do all the things that I know to stimulate those people to do that. I feel that probably the administration of the medical school programs, which begins with the group that runs the curriculum process, and that is the American Association of Medical Colleges. I've written to them several times and sent them information, and they don't respond at all. So I suspect that all those administration people over the century have probably never had a business education of their own. So they don't understand the importance of that. Now, all commercial business people understand those things. And I have never reasoned out why that a medical school would send doctors out in the private medical practice, for example, and have no idea how to manage it properly and efficiently and profitably. And I've often wondered why that the students themselves never questioned that. Why were they blind to all those things and the things that would release their ability to become a maximum opportunity and maximum abilities in their profession to be the best they can be? And they don't seem to realize that at all. And I'm fighting against something that what I call an impossible mission. How am I ever going to change the medical school curriculums and add on a business education at the same time? I think a few schools are trying to do that, but the biggest mistake they're making right now, I believe, is that MBA program, the 2 years, either on campus or not, is so horrendously expensive now that people can't stop their medical practice, go to a campus and spend 2 years, spend $40,000, $60,000 to get it, and they come back and they wouldn't have a practice left. So I have set up a couple medical websites in which I have 154 medical articles in those websites discussing exactly how any physician can learn what they need to know, have to gain the tools that they can get from that education on that website.
As you reflect back on your private practice career, let's go into more detail. What specific business aspects do you think future doctors need to have to practice in a private practice setting?
Well, number one, I didn't know how to hire people and to fire them. I didn't have a personality that I could fire a person because I liked everybody and I wanted to make friends with them. And so therefore I put up with things I never should have put up with. So the management of the people was one big thing. Second thing was to understand that you have to be aware every moment in your medical practice that there are things that you can do that'll improve your practice. And if you don't know those things, then how would you know? How would any physician know if their practice is going downhill unless they are just using their monthly statements from the CPA to see how they're doing in their practice? And that doesn't tell them much, because I doubt there's 1% of physicians can explain the bank statements that come from the CPA and tell them about their profits and losses and can explain it clearly. I
What
doubt
will
it.
be an example of that, of a metric that would measure the status of a practice outside of a CPA's bank statement? What will be an example of that?
Okay. Well, the biggest one is you walk up to any doctor today and you say, is your practice growing or is it going downhill? And so they have no measurement status in their practice to find that out or to understand that. You would think that maybe the simplest thing would be to say, well, I'll figure out how many new patients came into my practice last month, and I'll find out how many we have to send their records out to other doctors that have moved. And probably less than 5% of doctors ever take the time to do that. That would at least give them the beginning idea of what's happening with their practice. So it's all visual, thoughtful approach to the finances in medical practice that accomplishes nothing, and they lose. Probably those thousands of doctors every year that lose their medical practice for financial reasons are still wondering, what happened to me?
Mhm.
You know, what happened? I would do everything right. I don't think I did anything wrong. And boy, are they where I was at that time.
We're talking to Curtis Graham. He is an obstetrician gynecologist. His KevinMD article is titled Financial Survival for Physicians in Private Medical Practice. Curtis, where can people find your articles? What's the website?
I've started a new website, which should be up in the next couple of months. And that's Management, Medical Practice, Business, and Marketing, .com. That website contains 154 articles, each article specific to the area of marketing or area of business that accumulates the knowledge that they need to do what they have to do. And they don't have to spend $60,000 on a MBA program, which is so superficial. And if you talk to medical students who have had a MBA before they started medical school, which I did, I interviewed those, and every single one of them said, that MBA gave me far less information than what your website and your articles have done.
Curtis, thank you so much for sharing your story time and insight. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you very much, sir. You have a wonderful day.